Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray. I'm a detransition male, and today I'm going to be talking about the massive cover up in transgender communities about the reality and the existence of autogynephilia, even when there's clear and demonstrable evidence for the existence of autogynephilia. People are in denial. Even if someone admits that they have autogynephilia, even if someone says, this theory of autogynephilia describes my reality as a transgender woman. It describes the reality of why I am motivated to transition, why I have these feelings of gender dysphoria, why I feel these feelings of excitement, why when I, put on, a particular pair of clothing or like get engaged in some feminine activity, I get aroused, why I get euphoria boners. Even if someone describes all this, people will still be in denial and say that AGP is fake, autogynephilia has been debunked, it's transphobic, it's pseudoscience, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to be reacting to this thread on Reddit in the Honest Transgender subreddit called I Have AGP. So this person, this transgender woman, acknowledges that they have AGP, and yet everyone in the comments basically says that they're lying and that they're transphobic and that they're fake and that they don't have what they say they have, even though in the trans community supposedly everyone's valid. Like, oh, you're valid, your identity is valid, your identity is valid. But if you identify as a self-aware autogynephile, apparently, that's beyond the pale. That's going too far. You can't say that because that's transphobic. Okay. So this person writes, Blanchard says that AGP is a paraphilia and essentially a mental disorder. He also says that social, medical, and surgical transitions might be appropriate treatment for AGP. I definitely have AGP. I am getting excited by dressing up as a woman or imagining myself in a role of a woman in sex, but also in normal non-sexual activities. So this is very common for a lot, like most trans women. So if you go to you know like M to F, and you talk about, and you just search for euphoria boner, I mean, there's literally like hundreds of threads in here talking about euphoria boners, like why these people get aroused when dressing up or engaging in feminine activities. Just shave my legs, euphoria boner. Putting on a dress, euphoria boner. Thinking about being a woman, euphoria boner. Uh, Underwear, euphoria boner. Tried on women's clothing, euphoria boner. Um, Looking at trans women, euphoria boner. Being cozy and getting boners. Put on volleyball shorts, boners. Wearing women's clothing, boners. Uh, you know, Wearing femme items, clothing, boners. Getting horny when you do girl things, boners. So I don't know. This is like, like, yet somehow when this person accurately describes the scientific explanation for why those euphoria boners are so common by saying that I'm getting excited by dressing up as a woman, and saying that the reason for that is because I have AGP. You can't say that. That's transphobic, even though it's describing a reality that literally everybody acknowledges. Literally everybody in the transgender community, they just don't like the concept of autogynephilia, even though the theory is true. So anyway, they say, I hate that my body and brain react like that. It was my deepest, most shameful secret that drove me out of my home country, caused me to develop social anxiety and depression, and essentially stole a vast majority of my happy experiences in life I could have had. It essentially ruined my life, but I know now I have AGP. I'm not a woman trapped in a man's body. I don't believe in that, and I never did. I am a man who wants to be a woman. I always was. I have AGP. I had it since I was 5 years old. It's not my fault. It's a mental disorder. I am going to treat it with medical transition. And if it makes me happy, makes me look less threatening to women and more attractive to men, then I see this as an absolute win for everybody. I have AGP and I'm tired of pretending I don't. I have AGP and I have feelings and wants and dreams and worries. I am a human being, not a potential threat and menace to society or a deviant to be pushed away like trash. I have AGP and I can be confident and attractive and happy. I have AGP and it's okay. Drops Mike. Picks up Mike. And by the way, Butler says gender is performative. So if you do emotional, social, medical, or surgical transition, you are trans. And I don't even care what I'm labeled as or if people see me as a woman. I want people to be soft to me and I want to look cute. I don't need to pass, just need to not look like the bad stereotype. Also, a lot of trans people are completely detached from reality, living in a fantasy, drops Mike. Okay, so the first comment you see here is AGP is fake science described by an old cis dude decades ago. Okay, so first of all, the mere fact that it was described decades ago does not mean that it's false. Einstein's theory of special relativity is old, decades old, 100 years old, but it's still true. Science does not just science does not have an expiration date. So you can't just say that, oh, that research was old, therefore it's not true. No, that's not how science works. That's not how reality works. Reality doesn't work like that. Like reality does not go out of date. Also, the mere fact that he's old, okay, so that's ageism. You're dismissing the validity of someone's ideas based on their age. That's called ageism. That's not a valid argument. And also the fact that he's cisgender. Okay, so 90, I'd say like 98% of all scientific research ever published has been published by, cisgender people. So okay, so you can't dismiss science simply because it's a cis person. So that just doesn't make sense. Okay, so they say science doesn't end when somebody says something you agree with. His research was flawed, his logic biased. According to him, the only reason to transition was sexual. Okay, so this is what I want to pause and focus on for the rest of this video. This claim that Blanchardian typology, Blanchardian theory of autogynephilia says that the only reason to transition is sexual. In my opinion, this is the number one straw man, the biggest straw man of the theory of autogynephilia. And it is the reason why so many trans women are in denial of its validity, in denial of its truth, is because when they introspect, they look in on their own mind as to why they decided to transition. It does not feel consciously to their mind in terms of the identities and the reasons that their conscious mind spins up when they are reflective on their past, that they are reflective on their past, and they're looking at their episodic memories, trying to decide, okay, why did I transition? And then their mind, the narrative that they give to themselves in regards to why they transitioned, that narrative is not, I only transitioned because it was sexual. There's a more complicated narrative story, a more complicated narrative identity that causes people to give a different answer when asked the question, why did you transition? Because when you ask the question, why did you transition, you're dealing with the level of narrative and narrative identity. You're giving a autobiographical story. Every human who is normal and healthy has a capacity for an autobiographical narrative generation. We all tell stories about our life. We tell stories about our past based on episodic memory, the remembrance of particular episodes in our life. And we spin up narratives, and we have an identity that's based on those narratives. And also those narratives project a imagined future such that the narratives we have about ourselves cause us to act out in certain ways. So if you have a narrative identity of I am an artist, that is going to shape your past remembrance of your life in the past, and it's also going to shape your understanding and behaviors in the present, and it's going to cause you to imagine a future. You're going to imagine yourself as an artist. Maybe you imagine yourself as like a famous artist or something like that. And that imagined future as a famous artist, causes behavior change in your life. Now, there's also these broader narratives, that we assimilate into our self identity, about race and ethnicity and culture and gender. Well, for these transsexuals, gender is a major narrative that we like have about, like I I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm transgender, I'm non-binary. We have all these narrative identities. Now, when the trans women reflect on their narrative identity, they say that, it just doesn't feel to them as if the only reason they transition was sexual. They have this other narrative in their minds, like, oh, I'm born this way. I have this inner gender identity. I have a mismatch. I've always felt like a girl. You tell these stories about your life, these narrative stories, and the transgender ideology has given the trans community a new narrative in which to understand their autobiographical story as transgender women. I was born this way. I've always been a girl. I have this gender identity. Blah blah blah. So you have that transgender ideology presents a autobiographical narrative that is one socially acceptable, which satisfies the desires of the ego to present a socially acceptable facade, persona, mask to the public world. And then that persona or mask gets internalized into your autobiographical narrative you tell about your own life. But the key thing to note here is that with autogynephilia, the theory does not say that the only reason to transition for these people is sexual. The better way to think about autogynephilia is that it is a predisposing factor. It is a probabilistic predisposing factor. And what is the nature of that as a probabilistic predisposing factor? The probabilistic predisposing factor is that autogynephilia is an internalized attraction to the idea of the embodiment of femininity. So, and this is only applicable to the trans women who have some degree of gynephilia, attraction to women and femininity. So you are attracted to femininity and you are attracted to yourself being feminine. That is the nature of the predisposing factor. Now, just because you have that predisposing factor, it does not mean that you're determined to transition. It is just a predisposing factor, and lots of people who have this predisposing factor, they may not transition. Maybe they're just transvestites who dress up on the weekend or whatever. Maybe this predisposing factor, the only manifestation of it is in terms of a paraphilic fetish of some kind. But for other people, that predisposing factor, that internalized attraction, in combination with other causative factors in your life, it can go on to develop more severe forms of body dysmorphia. That predisposing factor might be causative insofar as you develop a dislike of your penis, of your testicles, of your masculinity, a deep hatred of yourself and your male body. So just because you have that causative predisposing factor, depending on your uniqueness as an individual and your uniqueness in your life, you're going to have different reasons for why you ultimately transition, because we have to distinguish between autogynephilia as a predisposing factor versus the ultimate reason or the multiple reasons why someone might go on to make a transition in their life. Because when you decide to transition, when you decide to deal with these feelings with hormones and social transition and changing your name and changing your identity and going through all this stuff, going through all these efforts, when you make a big change like that, there's going to be multiple causative factors that influence why you do that, because human behavior is incredibly complicated, and there's always multiple reasons for doing things. All autogynephilia says is that for the trans women who are not exclusively attracted to men, this internalized attraction is a probabilistic predisposing factor that influences your motivation, even if you also have other reasons. Like there might be other causative factors in your life. There might be trauma. There might be internalized misandry. There might be misogyny. There might be, exposure to transgender pornography. There might be exposure to sissy hypnosis. There might be the fact that you saw a transsexual on Jerry Springer when you were 12 years old, and that planted an idea in your head that you're now obsessed with. There might be, because you watched, Jazz Jennings on TV. It might be because, or it might be a lot of factors. It might be because your life is miserable and you don't see a future of yourself as a man. Your autobiographical narrative identity as a man may be not such that you can imagine a positive future as a man. Your narrative identity as a man is not providing a source of happiness and contentedness and purpose and motivation. Like so there might be multiple factors in your life that can cause the motivation to develop a trans identification. So autogynephilia is an incredibly heterogeneous phenomenon. It manifests in many different ways. And all it says is that there's this internalized predisposing factor. And we know that there is a predisposing factor because if you go to the M to F subreddit and you type in just a fetish, you'll literally see hundreds of threads talking about is it just a fetish? Oh, it's just a fetish, just a fetish. Is it just a fetish? It's just a fetish. It's all just a fetish. Trans just a fetish. What if it's just a fetish? Worried it's just a fetish. Afraid that's just a fetish. Is it just a fetish? Blah blah blah. Is it just a fetish? I mean, so clearly this idea. So the story shared by this person in terms of getting excited and dressed up and fetishizing the transformation of like like fetishizing the idea of transforming into a woman is incredibly common. But just because you have that internalized attraction to that idea of becoming a woman turns you on. That is your attraction. But and we have to distinguish between that internalized attraction to that idea of becoming woman, separate from the ultimate motivation and the decisions behind trans identification and transition itself, which involve multiple other factors. You might have two autogynephiles, both with the predisposing factor, and one of the autogynephiles has a lot of trauma in their life and the other one doesn't. That trauma might push them over the edge in to transition, whereas the other autogynephile who doesn't have that trauma in their life, they might not be pushed over the edge in order to take on the trans identification. So when we talk about autogynephilia, this claim that the only reason to transition was sexual, that is a misleading and false representation of the theory. So okay, that is it for this video. Hopefully I cleared up some misconceptions in regards to why why the theory of autogynephilia does not it's like not so reductionistic. The critics of the theory like to paint it as this ultra reductionistic theory that says the entirety of the trans identification, the entirety of the decision to transition can be fully reducible to a simplistic causative factor that is entirely based on eroticism and paraphilic attraction. But that is not the case. It is only that it is a predisposing probabilistic factor, and that predisposing probabilistic factor is having an internalized mechanism in your brain that internalizes your attraction to femininity. And you don't see this in the trans women who are exclusively attracted to men, because the trans women who are exclusively attracted to men, their probabilistic predisposing factor is their homosexuality. That is the probabilistic predetermining factor for those people. So, okay, thanks for watching. That's it for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.